Structural heart disease refers to a defect in the heart's valves, walls, or chambers that keeps the heart from pumping blood properly. Valve or structural heart problems may be present at birth or develop over time. Your risk increases if you have high blood pressure, plaque buildup, history of heart attack, take certain medications, or have certain heart infections. The Structural Heart Program at CIS and Terrebonne General provides innovative solutions and devices with the latest technology to bring the best possible outcomes for patients. Learn more at cardio.com.
Everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. It starts all over again in Baton Rouge as the legislative session gets underway on April 12th, but still got a lot of stuff to go into, and our next guest will be heading there in about a week and a half as the committee meetings start and all that, and that would be Jerome Zeringue, representative of the House Representative District 52. So, man, we appreciate the time, and God, seems like you just left Baton Rouge, right?
It does, and thanks for having me, Harry. It's always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, great to see you as well. And I guess last time we talked, it was like, look, the Republicans have nobody to blame anything on. You super majorities, governor, everything like that. We're going to talk a little bit more later about, you got some amendments coming up. There'll be a vote that's coming up as well. Mm-hmm. But we're going to start about insurance. And insurance tax reforms always seems like it's top of mind. But particularly around here, insurance. And actually some positive news coming out of the Insurance Commissioner?
Yeah, surprisingly so. Commissioner Temple came out with some latest information. You know, we've tried in the past to incentivize insurance companies, after Katrina, and I know the previous administration, they provided funding to try to incentivize insurance companies to come in, and that's doesn't really work, doesn't keep them here. And in fact, in a lot of cases, when you need them, they're not there anymore. But what has happened, some of the insurance package reforms that were passed last session are starting to make a difference, and Commissioner Temple started laying some of that out. Now, granted, there are a lot of issues with property insurance that we need to address. I mean, we have people down the Bayou, well, they can't come back because of the cost of insurance is greater than their mortgage.
Sure.
And not just down the Bayou.
I was one
a lot of it. Yeah. So, and myself, my insurance tripled. So there are things that we need to do, but we have to be realistic in terms of where we are. We are a state on the coast. The highest probability of a named storm making landfall is southeast. Once it enters the Gulf of Mexico, is southeast Louisiana. It's just the nature of the beast. So there is a lot of risk. We're a poor state, unlike Florida, which has a lot of risk as well, but they also have a more, in terms of not only population, but more productive in terms of what they have in their state. So we have the risk and not the incentive as much as Florida, but there are some things that we've done. And so just to point to a few of the numbers and things that have happened. So, again, we used to pay insurance companies to come in, but now we're not doing that anymore. And 10 new companies have come in without being paid, which is a good sign. And in statewide average market impacts, the rate change for 2024 was only 6.6%, which seems like a lot, but if you consider, you compare in 2023, it was a 14% increase, and in 22 was 16% increase. And I know a lot of commercial people, their concerns or issues, the rate change was up only 3%, which is a significant decrease compared to 23, which was 6.7, and 22, which is 3.9. So it's indicating that what we've done with fortified roofs, some of the things that we've implemented, insurers are starting to see that the state is stepping up and trying to address some of the issues and concerns. There's still more that we need to do. And then you look at the homeowners line, the rates that there were 50% rate request increase in 2024. Now, it sounds like a lot, but that's down from, in 23, 80 companies tried to get increases, and in 22, 75. And on the commercial market, same thing, there was a significant decrease in the request for increases. But more importantly, in the first 2 months in 2025, they've approved 7 rate decreases for residential homeowners, all between 4 and 11% decrease. And that's the first time that has happened since a long time. So there are signs that as we continue to reduce risk and do some things to improve the markets, that the insurers will come back to Louisiana.
Wow, that's great, because you were a part of that one that we were paying people to come in, and we had that 250 million. I'm not sure the number of where we had that pot available to match them. And so these 10 are not part of those things?
Yeah, these are additional
Wow. No, that's great news.
Yeah, we're no longer paying them to come in. Right.
No, that's great news. And we're stabilizing a little bit. Now, that's not flood insurance, right? So, I mean,
flood insurance is a whole nother animal, and we need to address that. That's more on the federal level, but there's no doubt that we need to do some things on the federal level, and I know a congressional delegation is working hard to try to address that, but there's no doubt that we need to do some things to correct the flood insurance program and make it more solvent.
Right, because, that's a big part of where you're moving to. If you're paying flood and higher costs, both of them were going up, that means a lot. Now, for insurers, a little bit, right? The cost of living, the cost of housing, we've all doubled, tripled our housing costs, and we expect to have the same amount of insurance. In their defense, everything's more expensive. So to replace those things, you can understand insurance going up.
Yeah, it is. But again, as what we're doing in some of the things like fortified roof, for example, the cost, you could apply for grants. We plan to put this legislative session more money into the fortified roof program. We put $30 million last year.
It's almost like a lottery now, isn't it?
Well, it's kind of like a lottery. It is for the most part. And if you get the grant, I encourage everyone to apply for it, and if you get it, use it, because the numbers are indicating that the percentage that you have to come up with, the 35% that you come up with, a homeowner, the reduction in terms of your insurance essentially pays for itself in 5 years. So that's the numbers that we're seeing right now. So by participating in the program, you're reducing your risk, and you're ultimately going to reduce your premiums, and that will pay for itself, at least the improvements that you've made within 5 years.
And then everybody is getting a grant to do it. If you have a new house and you're just building a house, can you just build it to fortified specs?
Well, yes, and I encourage folks to do that because it's much cheaper in new construction. Coming back, it's a little more expensive, but there's no doubt if you incorporate that, I think it's a 6% increase if you're starting with new construction, a 6% increase to achieve that.
Right. Okay. There's a lot going on there. Some of it's grants, but anybody can do it as long as you just pay for it.
Yeah.
You're just not getting a grant. You're not part of that lottery. Okay. One of 3 segments to go. So we'll be right back with more Bayou Time and Jerome Zeringue right after this.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your health is our legacy. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. We're speaking with Jerome Zeringue of Representative District 52 about the upcoming session. We want to finish off with a little bit of auto insurance before we get to the amendments. But you guys might work on that as far as, did I hear tort reform?
Tort reform, yeah. We did tort reform, and it was promised that insurance rates would go down, and didn't have much of an effect. And it depends on who you talk to and why. But there's no doubt that we need to address the issues with auto insurance. As we talked about earlier, it's easy to explain in terms of property insurance the risk that we have. Mm-hmm. There's no justification or rationale to explain why Louisiana pays 30 to 40% more on policies than other states.
Right. When people move here, that's the first thing they go like, oh my God, my car insurance. Yeah.
Is it the climate? Is it what it is? It could be the liberal attitude that we have to distracted driving. There's a lot of things, but there's nothing to explain why our insurance rates are so high, auto insurance rates are so high. So there are things that we're looking at. One of the things that we've tried to do in terms of tort reform, and I think that probably would help, is looking at full transparency in terms of what is actually being paid. Right now, the jury and those involved in the case only see what the plaintiff's attorneys will provide in terms of the billing. There's nothing in terms of full transparency. I mean, so it's the whole thing. If you talk to insurers, they blame it on the attorneys. If you talk to the attorneys, they blame it on the insurers and the roads and all the other things too. But there's no doubt that looking at the billboards and all the other things that are out there, trying to get people to just...
It's like our number one industry, it seems like, if you look at the billboards.
So there's no doubt that, and I'm sure billboards cost a lot too. So we need to do some things to address auto insurance, and I think we're working on trying to get some meaningful change in that as well. Whether or not we can achieve it,
Right.
Those are some of the things we need to work on.
Okay, so we have an election coming up. A lot of people don't know about it in the spring, but it's going to be 4 amendments on
4
that.
amendments,
So,
yes.
why don't we talk about some of those? And I guess amendment number 1 would have something
It's the
like
out-of-state,
being able to
lawyer,
discipline and out-of-state.
out-of-state law, discipline, and specialty courts.
What does that mean?
So right now, if there's, like we had some issues, especially after the storm where we had attorneys coming in, especially from Texas. You probably read about it, just took advantage.
Or got a letter from.
Yeah, that's right. Took advantage of situations. Well, the Louisiana Supreme Court is precluded from addressing some of those issues. This would allow them to do that. It also allow for establishment of specialty courts. So I understand and appreciate the fact to be able to do that. One of the concerns I have with this is if we're going to use existing judges to populate those specialty courts or hire new judges, because right now we have a lot of judges, and in some cases, because of population shifts and where we are in certain districts, we have judges who frankly don't have that much to do. We have some who are slammed and working their butts off and have too much to do and not enough help. But there are some cases where their judges just have too much time on their hands. So if it's maybe utilizing some of the resources that we have,
Disperse that load.
that would help in terms of providing some assuage some of the concerns that it would have on this amendment. But for the most part, being able to discipline out-of-state judges attorneys is a good thing.
I see. So number 2 would be a tax reform.
Number 2 is the big one in terms of
That's the one everybody's talking about.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the things that one of the biggest concerns I know I've heard, in fact, I was at the gym, we're talking about going to the gym, I was at the gym this morning, and somebody accosted me and saying, well, I don't want to vote for 2 because it's going to stop churches and other people from getting the tax.
State exempt.
Exempt, and that is completely false. That is not true. The state, the exemption that exists for churches and religious organizations is going to remain in statute and be there. And in fact, basically it's going to say that property owned by a nonprofit, or what's going to stay in place is property owned by a nonprofit operated exclusively for religious purposes, as for a house of worship, residential housing for clergy, priests or nuns, or a seminary or other educational institution, or training individuals for religious ministry shall be exempt from ad valorem taxes. So, that concern is not an issue. But one of the things that I think that's important in terms of what the tax changes are going to do is we're finally doing something different. Over the past 3 decades, we've consistently addressed the issue of not even tax reform, but the way we budget and utilize taxes in Louisiana has been consistent over 3 decades, and we are where we are. This at least provides some opportunity and flexibility for the legislature to make some changes or allow us to work within the budget to craft a budget that would be better for the citizens, better for business, incentivize business, and I think it gives us the flexibility that we need. So much is locked up within the Constitution right now that it's challenging to address the budget. Yeah. So this would allow some flexibility. Another concern that we heard is that, it's not the teacher pay raise. And
that's stipend, right?
Right. So what it is a stipend. So they really don't have a pay raise right now. And if we didn't do another stipend, they wouldn't have another.
This would be a permanent stipend.
This would take, what it does is it pays off, we're paying off the
it's like an $8 billion debt. $2 billion of that
for the retirement system. Right. So they could use that money instead of paying off debt. They would actually be able to. Locals could use that money to put toward teacher pay raises, but also provide them, the locals, more opportunities, not just for the school districts, but also like eliminating the inventory tax and other things that provides local entities to be able, through severance taxes and others, to generate income of which they can't do right now. And I think it's important that, and we've always talked about, who's in a better position to know how and where to apply taxes are the local people. And as more as we can put into the locals' hands, I think it's in everyone's best interest, the locals' interest and the state's interest.
Yeah, taking a page off of what's happening in Washington, right? Like, hey, let's take away the Department of Education and move it to the states. Kind of the same thing. The more local you can be, the more hands-on you know where that money's going, as opposed to like, I don't know where it's going to Argentina for certain things. All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back with our third segment with Jerome Zeringue right after this.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here, our final segment with Jerome Zeringue, Representative, House of Representatives for District 52. So we're talking about some amendments, and before we move off too, some of the exemptions are not going to be there as well, right? With some of them, and I was talking about some of these nonprofits that we're hearing so much about in the news now. New Orleans has a lot of NGOs, seems like they work, but there's going to be higher requirements for that too from the exemptions standpoint, right?
Yeah, it's going to eliminate some of the exemptions, or to impose an exemption or get one, it's going to take a 2/3 vote of the legislature, not a supermajority, and it's going to take some of the ones that are constitutionally protected and put them in statute, which would then give the legislature an opportunity to evaluate them and not have to go to the public to change it. But even to change it, it's still going to take a 2/3 vote. So there's still that level of protection because you need a supermajority, not a simple majority. Mm-hmm. But it's going to kind of rein in some of those exemptions, and some of them have been in place for a long time. Some of them aren't even being used. And so it's going to clean up a lot of the things that we have within the Constitution that don't necessarily need to be there.
Yeah. Looking at that, there's a lot of things. And when you can do a statute versus an amendment, it makes a little difference, right? You were telling me a stat about the number of amendments we've had in the United States?
Oh, yeah. The U.S. Constitution was amended 27 times. The Louisiana Constitution has been over 238 times, so it's been amended a lot. They've used it as an opportunity to kind of lock some of these things in place, which they don't need to be.
Right, and that goes to tax and all that other stuff, which you can touch and which you can't touch.
Yeah.
A lot of things. All right, number 3 would be juvenile crime, and that's always been a crime reform, those kind of things. I know Governor Edwards had a major reform bill. This is a little different as far as the prosecution of juveniles as adults?
Yeah. So for certain felony offenses, it would allow the legislature to determine if individuals can be tried as an adults. I mean, there is no doubt that there have been heinous crimes by teenagers that obviously warrant and are justified in that consideration. So it's not going to be a broader blanket, but it's going to allow the legislature, in certain instances, to determine which of those offenses.
Who determines that? The DAs or the legislature? Like
the legislature.
So do you have a number on it? I mean, does it stop at 10, or there's juvenile crime? Obviously, I guess depends on how heinous the situation is.
And I don't think necessarily there's a number per se, but I think it's more specific to the crime itself as to having a certain number of crimes. I think it's going to be the condition, other factors will be in place, but this will allow the legislature to weigh in to determine what that age would be.
I've also seen a little bit about this one, and I don't know if this is an amendment, where you can actually see the record of some of these juveniles that have these long history of being arrested and incarcerated and been right back out on the street. Is that in there anywhere on this where you can actually look up a history of a criminal history?
We have made some changes with juvenile crime, but there is still some of those protections, obviously, because of the juveniles and some of those other aspects. But we did allow for, mug shots and some other things that were being allowed. And so the list of previous offenses, I don't think you can go in and just look at that, but I think you have the opportunity if the prosecution or at least the district attorneys and all that would be able to look at that.
Yeah, and look, and I understand, juvenile crime and all that, but you've also seen people taking advantage of a situation where you got a kingpin that sends all these little juveniles out because he knows they're not going to have the same crime and punishment as
right. I think that is the impetus for some of this as well, is because of the fact that you had these older adults using these younger folks. But we're all responsible for our actions, and I think that's all going to be factored in there in terms of the determination of what criminal felonies and offenses would be allowed to be changed.
Okay, and number 4, that's judicial elections?
Yeah, that one is pretty straightforward. Right now, when there is a judicial vacancy, that it requires a judicial vacancy that every 12 months they would have that. This will allow for a judicial vacancy, the first available election, to be put on the ballot for an
So
opening.
instead of pushing it 12 months, say the next election comes up in 2 months, you'd have to be ready to go.
Yeah. Well, you can. I think it allows, right now you can't, but this would
right.
allow, if it's the first available one, you could put it on the ballot.
Okay. So those are the form. When's this election? It's Saturday?
No, early voting starts on March 15th.
Right.
And I think it's the 27th. Let's see, when's the election date? 29th. So early voting starts the 15th, and the election will be March 29th.
Okay. So you guys go in on April the 12th. Any blockbuster, anything we're going to see coming out of this legislature that we should be looking forward to?
Well, I think if the constitutional amendment number 2 passes, and be prepared. I want everybody to be
Right.
prepared.
This
When
is
you
an
go
election,
into the
right,
vote for this thing is huge. It's going to be a lot to read. So I'd encourage everybody to look at it before and ask questions. You're welcome to call our office and be happy to help. But if it passes, there's no doubt that we're going to have to tweak some things and correct it. Believe me, the legislature doesn't get it right the first time all the time, but it's going to allow the process to continue to make some improvements and change the way we budget and allow us to use reform the tax structure that's beneficial, reducing the personal income tax. It's not going to be higher than 3.75. It's limited. Reductions if for elderly senior citizens, the standard deduction is going to be increased. So there are some benefits of that. Encourage people to look at it. And I think this would provide an opportunity to definitely make some changes into the future to improve our tax structure.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. Yeah, you're knocking it away at it. So a week and a half, you'll be headed to Baton Rouge, and then April 12th, you start the session.
Yes, sir.
All
Good
right.
seeing you.
Thank you, Jerome. Appreciate it. We'll be right back with more Bayou Time right after this.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.